We are not dramatic storytellers. We are Atlas and Achilles, middle-aged adults who pre-tired, giving ourselves permission to see the world as we wish to see it, on foot. After nearly a year to the date, we arrived back in Avalos to pick up where we left off in 2024. Our flight landed at the Oviedo Airport, which is actually near to Avalos. In addition, we broke from our tendency of carrying our bags on board by doing the gate check procedure. We normally don't take that chance when departing, and while in line at customs in Madrid, the travelers in line next to us talked to us about how they'd lost their luggage doing the exact same thing on a different flight. We were relieved, however, when our bags came cozying on down the baggage chute. The Albergue La Fruta had a unique arrangement in that you had your private room and a private bathroom as well, accessed from the hallway. Here's the sign the Camino sent us in 2024 to go to the hospital and get things checked out. We walked through the streets of Avalos, back into the familiar eucalyptus-lined dirt tracks. En route, we came upon a restored communal laundry. There's quite a few of these relics along the Spanish countryside. The Albergue de Peregrinos de Naranjas was our destination for the night, and it was run by a husband-wife team who had just bought the albergue this year. We were warmly greeted with a cold beer and a brief overview of the communal meal plan. We're also treated to a proper Sidra experience while relaxing in the common area.
So what did you think of the Albergue Naranja?
It was very hospitable, and I had a shitty night's sleep.
Too many snores?
Yes.
We will say, however, that if you do a Camino, try to stay in an albergue with a community meal in the first few days, as it really sets a positive tone for the whole experience.
Right.
I liked the setup of that one. Where the bathroom was right next to
Just like the Rothschilds.
These high flyover bridges make me think of the fusion of traditional Europe and the modern European Union.
River through a tunnel. Hopefully there's no holes in the way.
After slogging through the bolotas, which are basically muddy up and down tracks through creek basins, we arrived at a hotel not yet open for the season. It was opening in 2 days. This explained why we were getting no response from the multiple attempts to reserve a room, so this time the strategy of showing up backfired. We launched into urgent mode because the next town was 2.5 hours away on foot, and having slogged 28 kilometers, we were too tired to go on. We did find vacancy at the Hotel Torre de Villa Damos and called for a taxi ride. And this time the Camino provided in a bougie way. The hotel was on the grounds of an old castle, and the room was very comfortable and nice. We had a Spanish dinner, which meant an 8 p.m. start, and we learned the history of the grounds. We also remembered our previous learnings from the plates at dinner, and we shared. Yes. Having made lemonade from the previous day's lemons, we had a nice European continental breakfast before getting back on trail towards the much anticipated coastal town of Luarca, where we did have a room reserved. Iglesia de San Miguel, we arrived at noon in time for the manual ringing of the church bells. At our last back-off break, we met up with one of the English peregrinos from the albergue in Muros de Nilon. We hiked into Luarca together and got to know each other. The arrival in Luarca is quite dramatic as you crest a small rise to this beautiful view of the fishing village. We arrived in time for Menu de la Dia and chose this restaurant with outstanding food and a nice outdoor table. We had our fill of red wine, seafood paella, huevos con patatas, jamón, and a custard dessert. Beautiful day for a 30-kilometer trek across secondary highway, dirt tracks, and farm roads. We happened upon the Vuelta a Asturias, a 4-stage bike race across the Adnams region. We walked past the efficient team of race officials who raced ahead, block roads, clear the path, and support the racers. We found a side road for a pack-off picnic and we watched the racers speed by. as quickly as they came, they were gone. We were back in the quiet countryside. During this day, it was probably the only time we felt touristed. It was a Sunday, so we knew meal options would be limited. It was suggested at the hotel that we go to a restaurant a few blocks away. It seemed to be the common location for peregrinos, and we did see a few familiar faces. The meal and atmosphere were all fine. We did have sticker shock because the main course of fish was 60 euros. Yikes. This is going to be our last day on the coast before reaching the last autonomous region of Galicia, where the Camino del Norte heads inland into the hills. To take in as much of the coast as we could, we followed the Tapia de Casariego variant and more closely followed the coastline into Ribadeo. This is totally worth the extra kilometers. seashells flip with the intent that the lines of the shell point the direction. I say intent because there are many monuments that did not follow this intent. I will also say there were mostly formal monuments to guide you, and for better or worse, the monuments also had the distance remaining to Santiago. That was a reminder about every 250 meters of how far you had to go. We arrived at the Albergue Ribadeo Alpont as the great Spanish and Portuguese power outage of 2025 was underway. There was no power as we checked in. The lights did come on as we made our way out to find the Menu de la Dia. Then the power went out again, but we found a place that was still serving. Wait until we were dizzy, and proceeded to go to the market to get provisions for the next few days. It was like a nightclub as the lights were blinking and flashing, trying to come to life. Power was still out, but people made the best of it, with the store employees dutifully at their posts and the beer still flowing at the bars. See here that this monument shell points just like the previous 3 autonomous regions. The Camino headed inland, and we followed mainly farm roads and dirt paths.
Kimchi for cows.
In Lorenza in time for Menu de la Dia. Had a really good meal before making our way to the albergue. It was a quiet place. We think it was a new owner. He was very attentive, very personable. It was in a refurbished castle, hence the name. It had a great shower. At the Montañedo Catedral, there are two options for leaving town: shorter, steeper high variant and the lower traditional, flatter official Camino route. The high variant was a newer option with less details about it, except that there are less amenities and water options along the route. We chose this route because we were well stocked and intrigued by the potential views. After climbing for an hour or so, we finally reached the wind turbines we'd been looking at for the past couple of days. The hike past this point was pleasant walking through rolling hills into the town of Aberdeen. We were very glad that we took this variant.